You're going to hear me talk a lot about yielding. And a horse's life is revolved around yielding. Yielding is submitting to pressure and giving to pressure. And I went to a horseman's festival thing here last week, and there were a lot of clinicians there, and all of them, the same thing. That's all they talked about is take your leg, yield your horse's hip, yield your horse's shoulder. You know, the importance to moving the horse laterally off your leg, getting that horse to yield, get him to yield his pole, get him to yield his neck, and so on. And what was frustrating with me is they were going around in all these circles, all these people, with horses that were very stiff and resistive to that, and were pushing against their leg and pushing against their hands. And what they left out was the most important thing, is I have to get a horse to where he'll be willing to yield first. And by that, I mean he cannot fight resistance. He cannot fight your hand, or he cannot push against your leg when you want to move him laterally. So something I have discovered just through time that works very well is hobbling. And this is a procedure that I do as a ritual that I've just acquired over the years of making a few mistakes and changing a few things and handling things a certain way, to where I've been able to get horses to yield by doing this without having to spend a lot of time with them myself. I can rig this up, and then I can go on and do something else, and the horse can spend its time figuring this all out on their own. Now I've got to caution you that this is something that is just not for everybody to just walk right out there and do. You've got to do your homework. You've got to know what you're doing to do this. You have to have a wide open space like this, where if the horse gets anxious or thrashes, it's not going to get tangled up and get hurt. So be very careful when you do this, and do your homework, and please do not just go out there and hook this up on a green horse, because it's not going to work. You have to prepare your horse for this first. Typically horses like thoroughbreds and halterbred quarter horses will absolutely almost turn themselves inside out to get out of these hobbles. So there's certain types of horses you got to be more careful with than others. Like you take a nice ranch horse like this, 45 seconds he's got it. You're not going to have to fuss with this guy. You know, he's bred to be a submissive, polite horse to start with. Where a lot of horses that have been just bred to do other things like racing or show ring work and all, they don't have the mental capacity sometimes to handle this as easy as others. So be careful. And but understand the purpose of this is not to force obedience into him. I want him to yield to pressure. So when I get on the trailer and he gets caught, he'll give to that pressure. If he puts his foot in a fence and gets caught, he doesn't pull the foot back and get it cut. If I put my leg on him or my spur, I want him to move over and yield to that pressure. If I signal him with my hands, I want him to drop his head and yield to that pressure. If I walk over here and I just push on him anywhere, see how this horse will yield? He doesn't push toward me, okay? Well, all that started with this right here, okay? So what we have are my set of hobbles right here. And then I've got my horseman rope. This one's about, I'd say, 15 feet. It's a little longer than my standard rope because I need just a little longer rope to do this, okay? So I take my rope and I come around here and I come between his legs like this. All right, come over here. And I put that rope between his legs, and then I come to his withers and I tie a good square knot or slip knot, just like that. I don't want a knot that when it gets too tight, I can't untighten it, okay? But I'm not going to set his head too low at this point. I'm just going to leave this loose, just like this. So I'm going to set this up first. And the reason I put this rope on before I put the hobbles is I don't want him to be able to rear, and I don't want him to be able to flop backwards when I put the hobbles on him. I want him to pick his head up and feel that pressure and then drop his head and give himself release, okay? So then I'm going to get my hobbles like this. And I'm going to come from behind like this. This, like that. Now you'll look in I've got another video I did on hobbling that'll show you how to prepare him to hobble. But we've got to get him yielding his feet and all before we just strap these things on there, okay? And I've got to work with him yielding his head and jaw like this in hand before I hook this rig up, because what'll happen is if you just go right out there and hook this up, he's going to pull against that and he's going to raise a ruckus maybe and get you in a little more trouble than you can get out of. All right, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rope like this and I'm going to tighten this where I want his head to be set in a very comfortable, natural position. I don't want it to be uncomfortable. I want him to have his vertical in a proper place, okay? And then I'm going to just step back. Now some horses, when you do that, they're going to hit those hobbles or hit that tie down, and they're going to really fuss about it. That's why you want to be back away from that when that happens, because I've had horses flop around like a fish doing this. And the rule is, I mean, once we put them on, we leave them on. We don't take them off till we're done. If he acts up and I take those hobbles off, he won the battle, and every time we do it, he's going to want to try to contest the process, and that's not what we want. What we want here is we want him to give himself release. And that when he pulls up against that tie down and drops his head, gives himself release. So he's teaching himself to yield. And when he resists those hobbles, he yields to that pressure. Well, see, that's the basis of all this horsemanship we do, is to teach this horse obedience and the willingness to yield before we start asking him for leg yields and before we start asking him for his pole with our hands and reins. If he won't yield his head like this, and if he won't yield his feet like that, he's not going to yield anything. So that's why I say it is so important for us to understand that we have to condition this horse's mind to be willing to yield before he'll yield. He cannot yield unless he's willing first. So he's got to trust us. He's got to know that if I yield, I'm not going to get hurt. It's not going to be painful. You know, a lot of people take their spur and pound on that horse, and out of fear of pain, he's going to yield. That's not what we want. I want to be able to walk back here like this and move his hip just like that. Very softly. See that? Just like that, just with my thumb. I can just touch his hair almost. Okay? And my horse Petey, I can look at that part of his body and he'll move. Now that's how light these horses can get. But I can't obtain that by wrangling with him and pounding on him and forcing him to do it. I have to ask him to do it. You notice I'm not walking up here and slapping him. I'm saying, move over, Boots. Move over, Boots. There. Thank you. See? This horse here, he's a very nice horse, and he was a big, old, tough, stiff ranch horse when he came in here. He didn't know anything about yielding, but I spent a lot of time with this horse working on this type of thing. Now look what a dandy we've got, huh? And he's going to earn a good home somewhere, serve somebody well. And folks, that's what horsemanship's all about, is for us as humans to learn how to bring the best out in this animal and get him to where he likes us and trusts us and wants to work for us.